Okay. All righty. Move our pictures. Okay. So we will get started. So first off, what is positive psychology? What is positive psychology? So positive psychology is the study of strengths. The entire goal of positive psychology is to enable individuals, their systems, their community to thrive. Positive psychology is founded on the belief that people want to lead meaningful lives and to cultivate what's best for themselves, even if they are displaying behavioral health symptoms or challenges. Positive psychology was developed by Martin Seligman, and he is still an integral part of the field today. There are 5 major goals of positive psychology. The first is its contribution to well-being. So, anyone that has worked with the START team will often talk about it's not just being about being stable and finding stability, it's about achieving well-being. And we'll talk about that more today too when we get to Perma. We also want to engage and relate to other people. We want to assist our individuals that we all support to engage and relate to other people. Finding fulfillment is incredibly important, and Nathaniel's case definitely was an integral part with finding fulfillment. Using creativity, productivity. This was a young man that prior to his escalation in his symptomology really had a lot going for him in horticulture, and he was getting trained. He lost his employment, as Yvette indicated, and that really led to his downward spiral. He lost his fulfillment. He lost the activities that put him in flow, and he lost his meaning. And part of all the work that START and the entire system did was to find that meaning for him again. The 4th major goal is looking beyond yourself and helping others to find their lasting satisfaction, meaning, and wisdom. That goes along with what I had just talked about. And the 5th is a question: what makes life worth living? Giving our individuals and all of ourselves a reason for the life that we are leading. So the VIA Character Strength Survey, as Yvette mentioned in completing with Nathaniel, is one of the backbones of positive psychology. So this survey was created by Martin Seligman himself and his team, and through research, and it identifies the character strengths that an individual may have. So after you complete this, it puts in order the 25 character strengths and from strongest to weakest. So when you look at your list, if you were to complete this character strength survey, any of the top 5, really definitely the top 3, are ones that you are utilizing and that give you the most joy and put you in flow. So my top character strengths are leadership, love of learning, and teamwork. And they make a lot of sense to me. So I don't have to try to use those strengths. Then when you look at maybe your lower strengths, there's this idea of, it doesn't mean that they don't exist, but they might not happen as effortlessly. So one of my lower strengths was appreciation of beauty and excellence. And that was something that also wasn't surprising for me. I'm very focused, so I don't always look around me in that way. But knowing that it's something that is on my weaker side, I'm able to put in interventions and supports to maybe bring it up if that's important to me. So within this PowerPoint that you all have that was sent to you out by Shirley, there is a link to the VIA Character Strength Survey. It is free. So anyone that is interested in their own strengths, I urge you to take it. There are a few versions. The versions that any of us would use is the adult version. At this time, there's actually present research going on across the country with different START teams to develop one specifically for the IDD population. For right now, what the creators of the survey indicate is that for anyone with an intellectual disability, we use the child version. It just simplifies some of the language. It's actually a little bit shorter, so it's more easy accessible for them. But again, there is one coming out for our population specifically, which is amazing. Forgot I put something fancy in. So these are the 24 character strengths. When you look at these, you can probably see that there is some themes. So there are 6 broad virtue categories. So one of the first is wisdom, then courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. So all of these fall into one of those 6 broad categories. Like I said, when you do the character strength survey, your results will organize these into a list of all 24 from your strongest to your weakest. This survey assists our in the work that we do with all of our systems to identify those top strengths and identify strengths that may be on the weaker side, but would really benefit that individual from pulling up, so to speak, and using more effortlessly. So those character strength surveys, we do them at our resource center. Our coordinators will do them, our coaches will do them, and we really just look to learn more about the individual. Sometimes it's really helpful for us to have the system of support also completed. If there's some conflict within a system, helping each other see each other's strengths and do some strength spotting and realize, hey, we're both creative. That's a strength for both of us, and finding that commonality can be really helpful. So I had mentioned the word flow earlier. So what it means to be in flow is when you're doing an activity, you're engaged in something, and truly time stands still. You get so absorbed into that activity positively that you are in flow. When you are using your TAP character strengths, research shows that you're more likely to enter that flow experience. So some people might find it in work. Some people might find it in hobbies. Nathaniel truly had that when he was working with his plants and doing horticulture. He was truly in flow and nothing could bring him down. He was doing very well. So when people report that they use their top strengths daily and they stay in that strength-based perspective, there's reports through research that they're in that positive flow more often. So that's the place that all of us strive to be in that positive flow mentality, where we, are engaged in something that truly nothing else matters. Again, I forgot I had some graphics, so I did not show you my ice cream cone. So the cone is where we are seeing meaning, and then it builds up to our lovely ice cream, which is flow. And it brings us to our well-being and our pleasure with that cherry on top. So that's just a very simple image that shows you what I just explained.
Well, I guess one of my character things is curiosity, because I was wondering what sprinkles would be on that ice cream cone, but I don't know.
Good question.
Yeah. All right. So positive flow does occur when we're in activities that we like Elise was saying. And on the next couple of slides, we'll get into that. It doesn't just happen. It's chemical. There's reasons why this occurs. And running is always my favorite example, because that's something that I do, long distance running. And what you see is, yes, the flow where time is lost. You could be at mile 3, mile 9, whatever. And non-runners think this is an absolutely ridiculous thing to say because they hate running. But it does. You just absolutely lose track of the time. The mood gets elevated, and the pain threshold also tends to be higher, but you just don't feel the discomfort because, as Elise said, you're just there. You're just in that moment, which is wonderful. Other physical activities you could see it in is,
Sorry.
Okay, biking and hiking. And I specifically put 2 non-physical things in: writer's flow and artistic groove, because I've had several patients through the years that was their flow. And they would tell me they would sit down to draw or, write their novel, and they'd look back and it's 5-6 hours later, and they just loved it. It was just, they were in that moment. Fishing is an interesting one. I put that one up there because I have a patient who's an ice fisher who apparently sits on a little something right on top of the ice. And there's a little hole drilled in the ice. I would think I would need quite a few Modelo's or Coronas to handle that, but this guy can go for 7-8 hours, and ice fishing is his groove. Nathaniel apparently joins Martha Stewart in gardening. That's a very common one, but again, it's peaceful. You're at one with the nature. So yeah, very much see that. Socialization is a tricky one. I wanted to put that in there. A lot of people love to socialize, connect, be at parties, be with loved ones. And the reason I put talk about self there is the brain reacts differently when you're listening and when you're speaking. And it turns out that when we speak about ourselves, we tend to get a little dopamine rush. So a sense of feeling good. Now that's a double-edged sword because we want to enjoy the interaction, but in some of our population, we want them to realize that you need to put that on hold and listen to who you're talking to. I think that's a piece of why it's such a chemical thing in ASD and ID, where it could be egocentric, because they do get that feedback of, ooh, I like that. I feel good. I'm talking about myself. And obviously, narcissism could be a concern. Intimacy, again, very important a human connection, and that changes brain chemistry. And gaming, I'm going to get to on another slide, but video gaming is absolutely fascinating to me about what happens with the brain. Okay, next slide. All right, so beyond the runner's high. So blood vessel formation decreases likelihood of strokes and dementia, which makes sense because you're perfusing the brain better. And chronic exercise definitely leads to increase in blood vessel formation. So that's a nice important thing to know. Hippocampal volume increases. That's the area of the brain that's associated with memory and emotional regulation. So let's think about that. We don't want that as we age to lessen. We want to have a good memory. We want to regulate our emotions well. And that's an area, not that this is the topic we're talking about, but in trauma that is very negatively affected. And we think about people with trauma and they don't handle emotions very well, and their memory is off and they get lost in terms of time and reference to what's going on in the immediacy. So I think that's interesting. More recent studies correlate exercise also with learning new material. So it's not just old memories, it's creating new data, new memories, and new information that we store. So in rodent studies, there's the voluntary wheel running rodents, and then there's the couch potato rodent. And when they did the study, there was a striking difference in cell proliferation, which means making new cells, cell survival, how long they last, and improved plasticity. And what plasticity means is the ability of the cell to assume different abilities, to be flexible. Perfect example in the brain is for the cell to be able to repair injury and ward off toxins. So in this case example, it's you want to be able to see the person be able to handle stress, which is an environmental toxin. All other types could be, things the person inhaled, things that the person experienced in utero. So cell plasticity is very important. And that is increased by exercise and doing things that put them in the flow. Okay, next. Okay, so the happy chemicals, dose. Dopamine associated with happiness, anticipation, drive, urge, and addiction reward. So basically, medications that raise dopamine help to decrease craving. I'm sure pretty much everyone here is familiar with Wellbutrin or bupropion, and that works on dopamine. It came out years ago to help with cigarette smoking. They gave it a different name called Zyban because they didn't want everybody to know they were taking an antidepressant, God forbid, because there's stigma against that. But it decreased the urge to smoke. And interestingly, in patients that I had, they had a decreased urge in gambling, decreased urge in shopping. So it helped just in a generalized way to have to, decrease that sense to try to feel better by being addicted to things. So the theory is that there's a depletion or an under-responsiveness to dopamine in the system, and that leads to craving sensations. All right, oxytocin. That's a very interesting chemical altogether. It's very associated with social love, bonding. It increases in hugs and intimacy. It increases in breastfeeding for the mom. Men also have it. And this was a fascinating stat. I'm going to try to walk the minefield of political correctness, but in only 3% of mammalian species does the male have high oxytocin in response to relationships. 3%. And it makes a little bit of sense because the male evolutionarily wanted to have as many offspring as they can. Now, fast forwarding to 2021 and being a male human being, it's a little different. So I thought it was kind of fascinating. I wondered if we could do oxytocin levels on men and see if those who get divorced or they're more players would probably not have as high oxytocin, and maybe we could post it on Hinge or Tinder, which would be kind of interesting and help you pick. But anyway, oxytocin was definitely worth bringing up because it is so associated with our emotional state and our happiness. Serotonin, regulation of mood from depressed all the way normal to manic, and obviously antidepressants have a big effect on that, as well as appetite. Endorphins, that's what's released with significant exercise. That masks pain and it allows you to power through. And if we take a quick thought, I don't want to dwell on this, to Nathaniel's medications, he's on stimulants. What do the stimulants do? They hit the dopamine, which helps drive, it helps interest, it helps get you into the flow. He's on SSRI, that helps with the mood and anxiety, but if it goes too high, it could lead to apathy and reduce interest in things. And he's on Risperdal, which definitely can help mood swings, but it doesn't do a blessed good thing for, energy and interest in things and that sort. So I'm not putting it down altogether, it's needed, but look how complicated someone like Nathaniel is in terms of the meds and us wanting to upregulate the neurochemicals that would make him happy and in a positive flow. Okay, next. Okay, the gaming one. This is the one that I thought was crazy interesting. Millions of dollars on research. Now, dopamine, think about what we just said about it. In game playing, the player is addicted to reaching the rewards. The delayed gratification, they'll pay for shortcuts. They'll pay for advantages. They're going to upgrade to the more powerful gun. Or if you don't want to do a violent game, you're in a little golf game, you're going to upgrade to the better driver or putter that's going to give you a better score. So they figured out ways to get you into the game, delay your gratification. You got this raging need to get a gratification, and boom, you'll do something to do that. Now think about our ASD ID people. That's a problem for them to begin with, to delay gratification. So they are perfect candidates to get totally addicted. Hence, the resource center should not have electronics, or Jillian will be fighting with them to try to help them with their dopamine in other ways, and it's not going to work. So I just think when you put a name, a chemical, and a part of the brain to it, it really, really helps to explain it. Now, oxytocin is interesting on gaming because there are online relationships, not only with other players, so you want to stay on and connect with these people that you really don't know, but you do know, but there's virtual romance. I'm a big believer that the world is going to get really weird with the metaverse, and we're going to have these alternate worlds where people are going to work, socialize, go wherever in an avatar. And I'm truly not crazy. There's a lot of money being invested in this. And the oxytocin piece is when your avatar falls in love with another avatar, you get that excitement. You got to see them. You got to talk to them. You can't be without them. So in games, there's a lot of joint playing to work together. So that's how the oxytocin fits into the game playing. Now, serotonin, back to our gamers who have to give up their electronics because the parent says it's time to go to bed. Well, what happens? The serotonin crashes. What happens when they give in the game back? Serotonin surges, so they feel better. So we have to work out strategies where they gradually come off their electronics, consistently know when they can do it. But again, there's a chemical reason why. They're not just being brats. I mean, they could be bratty to begin with, but there's a real chemical reason why giving up that love of the game is so big. And even the endorphin, which sounds harder to explain in a game, I have a guy, he's a high functioning autistic guy, and he will play 14, 15 hours a day. He'll forget to eat, he'll forget to drink. And when I think about it, he's probably getting these endorphin surges where he's just feeling so good, a little high, and he doesn't feel the discomfort of sitting in the chair or the discomfort that he's got to go pee and he hasn't peed in 8 hours. So when you look at all these neurotransmitters and chemicals, they play a huge factor in people getting very addicted to the game industry. And frankly, whether it's Microsoft or Netflix or Facebook, they know this and they're doing research on it and they're maximizing the impact.
I was muted. Before we move into PERMA, I wanted to just take a short break just to see if there's any questions about the character strengths that I had spoken about, or all of this wonderful information that Dr. Kent just shared.
Hey, Dr. Kent, it's Dawn. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
I had a quick question. So we commonly, one of the main referrals, or not main referrals, but one of the referrals we do a lot of time is Game U, because it taps into individuals who have an interest in gaming, PERMA, and sometimes they have difficulty in the social setting. So there's that remote aspect. Do you think that's kind of feeding into something negatively at the same time as we're trying to promote something positively?
I think it's something we have to realize it's a reality. The world works this way, the kids socialize this way. But I think knowing this information, we have to do it with eyes wide open and explain to families how there need to be boundaries and structure, and maybe even virtual calendars of this is when you'll meet, this is when you won't be doing that. So yeah, it's a little bit of a risk to do it, but I think we need to, because that is their strength, and that is their ticket into socializing. And I also try to educate the individuals that do this, not to this detail, but explain to them, this is how you're going to feel when you're on, this is how you're going to feel when you're off, and help the parents to understand that to them, these are real relationships, because parents will start yelling, oh, this is ridiculous, you don't know the person. No, but it's very real and very important to them. So the short answer to your question, yes, I still think we should use Game U, but with initial rules, regulations, and boundaries.
Okay, thank you.
That was a great question.
Yeah.
Any other questions from what's been presented thus far? Okay.
Well, not question, but a comment in reference to the subject at hand, Nathaniel. So I tapped into his love of horticultural, saying that wrong, and he was presented with 2 identical plants. I think it was oregano that I had just before he moved into his forever home. One was to stay at home with mother, who he had a strong connection with, a daily connection. One he took to his new home. So they would have in my head, they would have the connection of taking care of the plants together every day. That kept their connection, and he would form a new connection with his new staffers and his new friends there for them to help him take care of the plant, and they could share the fruits of the labor in some recipes, as well as he could be in charge of revitalizing the sort of dead garden that they actually had on the side. So keeping that strength that he had and that love that he had to keep a well-rounded connection all around.
I love that intervention that you put in place to, again, keep that connection with his mom, but also help him build a new connection and utilize his top strengths and utilize his top interests of what put him in flow.
That's great. I had a guy I was doing that with. It worked out wonderfully. Then until I realized he was growing cannabis, so it was another issue. But I think that's obviously otherwise a phenomenal thing for the person to be doing that. And it sort of does another thing. The object constancy that he has it in the both spots, I think, is hugely important.
Yeah.
I think it was oregano I gave him. I hope so.
It was basil.
Basil.
Thank you.
As long as it wasn't cannabis. All right. Any other thoughts, statements, questions, comments? Okay. So we're going to jump into Perma Plus. So the idea of Perma Plus was developed also by Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology. I did link 2 different sites. The first is a YouTube video. We're not going to watch it. It is longer, but it's actually a talk directly of Dr. Seligman's, explaining PERMA and positive psychology. It's a really great resource. And the second link is his website through the University of Pennsylvania, where he is based and his research is based, and it's Authentic Happiness. And I just shared this resource with our coaching team earlier this week, because it has a ton of other assessments outside of just the character strength survey that they developed that we use primarily in order to kind of further investigate some of these ideas, and to gain a really deeper understanding of what makes people happy and what puts them in flow. There are one specific assessment specifically on PERMA, as well. So those are just 2 links that you guys have within the PowerPoint. So Perma Plus, and it used to just be Perma, and they added the plus in recent years, but it's based on the idea that wellness is not one-dimensional. It's multifaceted, it's composed of several different elements. And going back to what I said earlier, it's not just about us assisting our individuals that we support in finding stability or being safe. It's about wellness, and it's about allowing them to have a really positive, strength-based life. So we're going to go through all of the aspects of PERMA in the next several slides, but just to introduce it. So PERMA stands for positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, achievement. And the plus is physical activity, nutrition, sleep, optimism. So those were things that they had added through further research, realizing that those were also a part of this wellness idea. So starting with positive emotions. So this is more than just happiness. We want to assist our individuals and ourselves in experiencing positive emotions throughout the day. So again, this is not just being happy or feeling good, as we often ask some of our individuals, and that be their response. This might look like amusement or hope or joy. It could look like love and compassion, gratitude, optimism. You know, we want our individuals to, again, not just feel okay. We want them to truly experience positive emotions. As we'll see in the next couple of slides, all of the aspects of PERMA influence each other. So the idea of if they're positively engaged or they have things that provide their life meaning, they will be more likely to feel positive emotions. So they are all interconnected. On the bottom of the slide, I listed a couple of different things that, whether we want to improve our own PERMA or we want to assist the individuals we support improve their PERMA, that can help. So doing some gratitude work. So it might be finding things we're grateful for, doing gratitude journaling, reflecting on what's going well. In my private practice, I usually talk to my clients about, you know, when they're having a rough day, oftentimes that one rough patch was a very small part of their day. And if they try to think about what made up 80% of their day, it's not necessarily that negative interaction, mood, or thought. So assisting the individuals that we support, ourselves, people around us, in finding that positivity, reflecting on that positivity. Gratitude journaling is very, very helpful for increasing the positive emotions people are able to reflect on. Simple things like spending time with people that you care about, being with people that also promote happiness and positivity, doing activities that you enjoy. Again, reflecting on there is overlap to things that we're going to talk about in the future slides in relation to the other aspects of PERMA. Simple things like listening to uplifting music, exercising goes along with what Dr. Kent talked about in regards to the chemicals in the brain. So up next is engagement. Oh, did anyone have a question? I thought I heard it on mute. Just side noise. Okay. So engagement. When we're engaged in things we love doing, we lose track of time. So this is going back to what I talked about earlier with
And
flow. Is anyone trying to ask a question? I have heard someone unmute a few times. Okay. Okay. When we're engaged in things that we love doing, losing track of time, we're in the present moment. We're not worrying about what happens next or what happened the previous day. We're entirely focused on the task at hand. Again, reflecting on that premise of flow. that I talked about earlier, being so intently focused and happy in what you're doing in that moment that time stops. When our greatest strengths are utilized, we experience that flow. Something I want to mention is when we talk about PERMA with systems at times, and we talk about engagement, sometimes they'll be like, oh, well, they attend a day program, so they have something to do. It's not really what we're talking about, right? Maybe their day program is exactly what they want to be doing and it's putting them in flow and they truly love it. And that would be wonderful. But we're also talking about things that they really love doing that will improve their quality of life. So going back to Nathaniel, I remember in a lot of the consultations and conversations that Veth and I had, and even, Mona being a part of those conversations, we talked about how can he occupy his time? What would he love doing? And always went back to horticulture. He truly experienced flow when he was working in his job. He was at his best. How can we replicate that? How can we either find a new job that would provide that? That is part of what led Mona to some of the tasks that she, did with the basil plant, helping him be, part of the team that brought their garden back to life, again, right in their own home. But, I remember conversations with Aveth about, how can he continue the certification courses that he was in with horticulture that he had stopped doing at one point. Now that he was moving, what's available to him there. Again, not just simply saying, we need a day program. We need something to occupy his time. It was truly an investigation into what would be best for him and what would put him back in flow. If you're unmuted and don't intend to ask a question, please mute. Some other ways to build engagement is learning mindfulness techniques. Again, going back to what we mean by being engaged, losing track of time. People that truly love mindfulness and meditation, they lose track of time. They're truly invested in those moments. Sorry, guys, I'm just muting people that are not muted because we still have people not muted. Okay. As people go about their daily schedule, taking time to enjoy the moment, all of us in this field, I know, are incredibly busy and we go from activity to activity and meeting to meeting, but really taking time to enjoy the moment, enjoy the successes. This case is a great example of enjoying the success of Nathaniel's growth and the ability for him to live his best self. Appreciating the being in the now, being aware of how you use your time. So oftentimes, I see clients in my private practice as well as we see them within START, and people just don't have enough time to do anything, right? And they can't do things that they enjoy because they have other responsibilities and things that have to get done. So being aware of how you use your time and really looking at that for our individuals and how we can best use their days, assist them in that engagement. And again, we're talking about engagement in regards to finding flow, not just something to fill our time. Spending time in nature, watching, listening, observing what's around you. There's a lot of different grounding techniques, utilizing the senses, the 5 senses, that is really helpful to bring people into the here and now. And lastly, as an example, is identifying and learning about character strengths. And this is a really important aspect of what START utilizes to help build this engagement, being more than just something to occupy our time and our individuals' time, is what are their character strengths? What do they most love doing? What are their best interests? How can we use their character strengths within those interests? So oftentimes, I've had conversations with Jillian, our resource center director, and the team over there is, if we have guests at the resource center that come back a lot, it's how can we then use their strengths of being helpful or being a leader on their subsequent visits. Maybe they can co-facilitate a group that they've experienced before and assist their peers in working through that group, to give them additional responsibility and additional engagement. If they're looking to build their independent living skills while at the resource center, and they have a high character strength of helpful or leadership, like I said, or love of learning, or any of those kind of wisdom virtues, having them help make meals and be a part of those aspects will help them meet their goals. It also is very in line with their character strengths that assist them to be in flow while they're experiencing those engagement activities. Well, that's weird. So this slide is something's wrong with it, so I'll just go off the cuff. So relationships are an extremely big part of PERMA and all of our well-being. And again, it's not just about having people in our life. A lot of our individuals primarily have paid supports. They don't have as many natural supports as they would benefit from. So it's always very important when we're working with our systems to really identify those opportunities for natural supports. And what Dawn brought up earlier with Game U, and that was a really great question about, is it, in conflict with what Dr. Kent was talking about? But a lot of times things like those activities, the individuals that we support are able to build relationships with people that have similar interests, similar strengths. Again, going back to engagement, it's not just about having engagement. It's not just about having people in your life. It's having the right people in your life. It's having the people that you need to support you and for you to support. It's about positive relationships. Again, a lot of our individuals are surrounded by paid supports. How can we assist them in building relationships with natural supports, people that aren't paid to be around them, that truly want to engage with them and have a relationship with them? Within the relationship, there's a lot of ways to build this. We want to ensure that, again, they're having that engagement in activities that are positive for them. Through that, the hope is that they will build relationships with those that have similar interests and strengths. We want to build natural supports. A lot of times with START, we are not just looking for the parents, but is there a sibling that we can maybe do some repair work? Because sometimes the sibling relationships are difficult, but is there a way for that sibling to be a support for them? Is there a way for a cousin or an uncle or someone within the family to also be a support for them outside of just that parental unit? And then outside of family as well, obviously, in building relationships, whether it be at their day program, at their jobs, within activities that we refer them to. Meaning is the next layer of PERMA. This is really difficult for not just for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but I think meaning is hard for all of us. To have a sense of meaning, it means that we need to feel that what we do is valuable, it's worthwhile. Some people feel that in their jobs. Working in this field is not easy, and I'm sure all of us can agree to that. It's a very difficult field, but I hope that people find meaning in the work that they do. But meaning doesn't have to happen from your occupation. It looks different for everyone. So finding meaning in your life through becoming involved in organizations that are important to you, spending time with people that you really care about so that you feel at peace, reviewing your strengths. What are you good at? What are you passionate about? How can you apply that to your life? Being authentic, embracing the real you. Now, obviously, this is written to all of us, but how can we apply that to the people that we support? If there is something that is really important to one of our individuals, we could assist them in getting involved into volunteer opportunities. Maybe they really love animals, but they live in a group home, so they can't have a pet. Maybe they can volunteer a couple hours a week at a shelter. And an engagement activity like that, again, the overlap between all of the aspects of PERMA could also provide them with a sense of meaning. It could also provide them with an opportunity to feel valued and worthwhile, and that they have a purpose every time they go there. For anyone, if maybe they've lost family members to something like cancer, maybe there's an organization that they would like to volunteer with, raise money for, go to a breast cancer walk, something simple like that we can enhance their life with, that again can make them feel worthwhile and a part of that cause. Reviewing our strengths and knowing our strengths is a common theme between all of these aspects of PERMA. In order to know where to go with PERMA, whether it be for ourselves or for the individuals we support, we have to know our strengths. We have to know what we're best at. We have to know what puts us in flow so that we can then apply it to our life.
Elise?
Yeah.
I just want to bring up one thing under the meaning heading. with a lot of my patients, I will bring up religion. Not
Mhm.
that it's a matter of being pro or anti-religion, but think about what religion does for a lot of people. It incorporates meaning, purpose, social connectedness. So for a lot of individuals, that's something that could be a valuable part in making them feel, again, the meaning, the connection, the sense of flow. So I think I just wanted to throw that out there on demeaning as well.
Absolutely. It's a great example. Excuse me. Achievement is our A of PERMA. So some research says achievement, some says accomplishment, but it really is this one in the same. Having a sense of accomplishment means we work towards something. We've reached a goal. It doesn't have to be a large goal. It can be a small goal. Having achievement, having accomplishment, it contributes to that sense of well-being that we've been talking about. We're able to say, I did it well. I achieved something that maybe I didn't think I could. People who exhibit grit don't just finish what they started, they persevere at their goals. So any of us that went to grad school or got their medical license, we all had grit. We all had to push through. We all had to experience that perseverance at our goals. Anyone that experienced hardship during their time of reaching that major life goal really had to persevere and push through. Our individuals are the same way. Going back to Nathaniel, he was on the path of a certification in horticulture before his increase in symptomology and his hospitalization and start re-entering or entering his system of support. And that was put on hold. He lost his job to no fault of his own. He lost his sense of meaning. He no longer felt he was valuable and had purpose. He lost his engagement activity and his friendships that he made at his job. And he spiraled. And his symptoms got worse and worse over time. Like Yvette mentioned, he was in the hospital, what ended up being for 10 months. And this was someone that really was doing well in their life and hit that moment in time of, I no longer have meaning. I'm no longer achieving my goals. And that contributed to the symptomology that we encountered when we joined the system. And a lot of that was he was no longer reaching for goals. He no longer had a goal. He no longer was working towards his certification. He was no longer engaged in what brought him flow with horticulture. So the work that was done while he was hospitalized, as well as after he was hospitalized, was to get him back on that track of setting goals for himself, setting achievable goals for himself, and slowly getting back into the workforce. And now, as far as I'm aware and remember, he is back employed. He is in activities that put him in flow, and he reached those goals that he set for himself, even though he had a really big downward spiral in that process. It's important for our goals to be achievable. Anyone that has any experience with SMART goals, systemic, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound, helping our individuals set realistic goals for themselves as well. We talk about this a lot at the Resource Center, and every day at the Resource Center, we do a morning meeting and we have the individuals set goals for themselves. And now these are not goals like live independently or buy a car or these large, hefty goals that maybe they do want to achieve, but we really help them be as achievable within that day as possible. And we talk to them about, if your goal is to live independently, what can we do today to get a sense of achievement in working towards that goal? And it might be as simple as doing their laundry independently, helping to cook a meal, do a chore around the resource center, helping a peer with something, whatever it might be. So again, those achievable goals are really important. Doesn't mean we don't want them to set more long-term goals, but having short-term achievable goals also helps them to feel the sense of accomplishment and helps them have the drive to work towards bigger goals. Some of the things that we want to think about is, what strengths have you used to succeed in the past? Can they help you again? This is a big thing that was worked on with Nathaniel. He achieved goals in the past. How could we get him back to that? Like Yvette talked about, he was a major part of his system. He made his decisions. He chose which group home he was going to move into as his forever home. He has decided how he's going to spend his time. And through the system support in helping him realize that he has value, he was able to do that and succeed. Celebrating our achievements. That can look different for everyone, right? Some people have a big party, some people have a drink after work, some people, buy something for themselves. It doesn't have to be anything major. It could be a sticker on a chartboard that we make for our individuals and praise. Verbal praise goes a long, long way. And it's always important to remember, if at first you don't succeed, always try again. Just because the individuals aren't reaching their goals or we're not reaching our goals doesn't mean that we won't be able to in the future. And again, if they're struggling to reach goals, then going back to that SMART goal thought process, is it achievable? Is it realistic? Do we need to look at breaking up the goal so it's in achievable steps? And the last part of PERMA is our plus. So physical activity, we cannot have a general overall well-being that we're talking about with PERMA without physical health. So the physical health is incredibly important when we are talking about overall well-being. Oftentimes in START, we are exploring a lot more than mental health and IDD. We're exploring diabetes and seizure disorders and genetic conditions. We are exploring, all different layers of physical health, because without that, it's very difficult to achieve general well-being. It's also really important to remember that individuals and people that suffer from mental health concerns are more likely to be less physically active. So we want to, embrace physical activity and find ways for the individuals that we support to become physically active and to enjoy those activities to bring in their positive wellness. Nutrition is extremely important, as I'm sure, and nobody is shocked to see it on the list. That statement, you are what you eat, right? It's important. What we put in our body is what we get out of it. There's a lot of food that is important for our brain health. Our physical health could not be positive without nutrition and physical activity. So nutrition is incredibly important. And then lastly is sleep. We see this a lot in our population, is difficulty with sleep for various reasons. But a lack of sleep is associated with disruptions in mood, thinking, concentration, memory, learning, diligence, reaction time, so many different things. We have a case, I'm currently enrolled in START. He's probably 14 by now, maybe even 15, but at the time he came to START, he had a lot of behavioral health symptoms and he had a seizure disorder. And based on the medical reports, he was having over 270 seizures a night during his sleep. He was never entering deep sleep. He was never entering REM sleep. And the system is changing psych meds and trying to address his mood and his other behavioral health symptoms. And until we deal with the sleep, we really don't know how to help any of the other aspects, because all of that lack of sleep is a big part of his disruption during the day. And again, part of his sleep disruption was his seizures. And until we really were able to get a handle on the seizures and his sleep improved, it's hard to know what he needs otherwise. Luckily, he's doing much better now. Still, we're still working on it, but he's doing much better. And once the seizures had better control and he has less seizures at night, his daytime behavioral health symptoms are very minor when they were pretty significant prior. So again, that lack of sleep is incredibly important. Dr. Kent, not to put you on the spot, but did you want to add anything about these categories?
Yeah, I'm glad you really emphasized the sleep, because I see that in my practice. I've had more people have a self-injury attempt or a real plummeting of their depression or anxiety the day after a poor sleep or the day after drinking and having a poor sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So it really sets it off. And I very often have to talk with families and individuals about accepting medication at night that will help for sleep, because the cost analysis of not sleeping is so severe that I know nobody wants to take meds if they don't have to, but the sleep is so essential.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so throughout the last couple of slides, I talked about some activities and some areas to increase Perma Plus, but just to give you a couple of other ideas. So journaling, giving them an opportunity to talk about the positive thing throughout the day. Oftentimes, not only people with intellectual disabilities, but also all of us, focus on the negative. So helping all of us, really document those positive attributes. Journaling could look different for everybody. We can do gratitude journaling. There can be bullet journaling. You can have the individuals, if writing is not a forte for them, they can use creative arts and they can draw their feelings and positive things that have heard happen to them. So it doesn't have to just be someone that's higher functioning to utilize journaling. Writing letters of gratitude. It's really powerful to put that in writing and then to give it to somebody else. Imagine how you felt if someone wrote a letter of gratitude to you. It really is very meaningful. There's an activity that we do at the Resource Center called Warm Seat. And we just did it, actually, Jillian and I did it with staff last week, or that might have actually been this week. It was Tuesday. And we put them in the hot seat to have them see how it feels and to really assist them in building their capacity in their jobs. But really what Warm Seat does is it allows everybody that's in the room to provide the person in the warm seat with positive attributes, their strengths, something that they did well, anything positive gratitude wise. And it's really, really powerful. And when the individuals do this activity in the resource center, some of the things they come up with are really inspiring and things that you didn't realize they were picking up on, things that they can say, Johnny was really kind to me this morning when he helped me with something. Things that, it helps them to reflect on it, and then it helps the person receiving that. Strength spotting is incredibly important. And I know coaching works on this quite a bit in our systems, but to see the strength in ourselves. So it's not just about the individual, but having the individual strength spot somebody else, staff strength spotting other individuals, really being able to say, I caught you doing something well. I caught you being a really great team member. I caught you being extremely kind. Here at START, even within our own team, we have opportunities for that within our office, and even an electronic one that we used in the midst of COVID to strength spot our own team, to provide opportunities for appreciation and acknowledgement. It really does go a long way, and it goes a long way for the individuals we support as well. Teaching methods of being empathetic. A lot of times some of our individuals are self-centered. We know that their worlds are surrounding them, and usually the people around them are surrounding them as well. So teaching them those methods of caring about others, some of these things that I've talked about are ways to do that as well. Mindfulness, acts of kindness, all of those things go a really long way in increasing Perma Plus. Goal setting, as I talked about with achievement, is incredibly important. And then there's a worksheet. You can literally just Google map your happy. But there's a worksheet that really does map your happy, and it assists the individuals in documenting what makes them happy and what puts them in flow. And it's a really great worksheet that can be utilized with the individuals we support. I'm going to stop sharing and see if anyone has any questions, comments, thoughts.
So I feel like I can say that when I was applying for this job, because I haven't been here that long, that for me, the fact that this whole program is based on this positive aspect was like a really big determining factor for me. I think that, whenever you're dealing with a case and you come from a more positive standpoint, or I'll never forget, in orientation, it was is it manipulation, or are they just really good at getting what they want? And that was really important for me, because there's so many times where these skills that we could turn into something positive are always considered negative. And so, I really appreciate the CET. And I think that it's really good that we do this in our field, and it's important for all fields to maybe start adapting more of this Perma positive psychology approach.
Thanks, Jillian.
I have a question
Sure.
about how you actually were able to get the system to sort of implement the horticultural intervention, because I think with a lot of the systems, we see some resistance in, oh, well, we can't find time every day. And, you know, maybe they'll take the person out for 10 minutes or even 5 minutes and look at a plant. But like, how do you make that into something that's really a significant enough part of their day for it to be you know, like have the intended purpose? And also, how do you get the longevity piece of them, you know, kind of buying in and sticking with it?
It's a great question.
That question for me, Amy? No, okay.
Go for it, Mona.
I started off on a small level, like I said, before when he was still at home, a few days before he moved into his forever home. I just made constant positive references to how well his home garden is doing and how he's so helpful with mom and how he does such a good job. And I hear that, you know, he was very good at his job. So I moved that into bringing the 2 plants, basil, thank you, Yvette, and started to make the connection that he will always have that connection with mom and their loved interest and his strength. And then he moved his plant to his forever home. I incorporated the staff there with the goal going forward that is his plant to take care of, but he can share it in dishes. They can ask, can we use some of the plant in like spaghetti sauce tonight? And he could be a part of that, you know, yes, and take care of it. So I moved like little steps by steps. And then I noticed they had a garden that he could start to care for. They said they had neglected it. So that built it up even more that, oh, this is something that, you know, you can help him build back up again. He's very good at it. And I was positive in that way. And then I moved to, since he had just moved there and he couldn't immediately find a job, I gave him the goal of he could periodically Google and look up like Home Depot and florist and places like that in the area to start to make a plan for when he could interview and find a job. So at least he had a list of names, addresses, and numbers that he could go through with the staff. And then they could have a plan to go forward that way.
Thank you, Mona.
Did that answer your question, Amy?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm curious about the buy-in of the staff and, you know, how they really like, and maybe Yvette can, you know, comment on that too, but like, was somebody really going to spend the time with him to sort of help, or was this more individual driven? I'm just curious.
Well, they
So for
said
me-
they would as far as job search and helping him navigate the area. And that part I really believe, obviously, because he has a job. As far as the gardening, my time had ended then, so I left it with them. They said they would, but that's on Yvette, I guess, to answer.
Right. And one of the things that I have continued to do is reframing and modeling. So working always with the staff. Backtracking a little bit, when I first started the case, everything had a negative tone to it, negative language. So from the beginning, I started to model really positive language. I started to really speak into what would be productive language. And the system really caught on very quickly. There were times, especially during, you know, his diagnosis of COVID-19, where, you know, this was in the very beginning where really no one knew what was going to happen to him. But yet, I was still able to, anytime they would come with, you know, their doubts and their fears, I was able to be there and reframe and use positive psychology and hope. And always stick to what strong, he had a lot of strengths. And I would always focus on his strengths, his perseverance, his character. So that's one of the things that I have continued with this system throughout this, you know, throughout my caseload. I have continued to really use that and always reinforcing positive language. And I think that even when we hear it, it almost like when we're constantly hearing negative language, for me, it just brings me down. So when I reiterate positive language, or just find even the smallest of things to really be grateful for, and show them, we should be grateful for this. And it helps them to really rise above that negative feeling and emotion. So I think that constantly, being aware and constantly just being there for the staff, and being there for the parents and everyone involved in the system, and just elevating that those emotions and that language, I think that has really helped stabilize this system.
And I'm glad you said the word grateful, Yvette, because that's one of the booklets that I bought to work on over the course of a few weeks. It was 50 things I'm grateful for, I think. So he and I, and along with the staff, I would rope into, would work on it a little bit at a time. I didn't want him to chop it off in one sitting, because I wanted it to marinate over time. And it's just what it says, 50 things I'm grateful for. It had different scenarios, like a happy place with my parents, a happy memory. And each time we would answer maybe 5 questions or so at a time. That does automatically evoke happy memories. And then we would discuss the memories. So to keep him moving forward that way, what to be grateful for, and just the happiness. And being that the staff was there, these were answers that they could utilize to, oh, well, you've been here at such and such time. So it kept it like moving like that.
I feel like, just even from more of like the clinical side of things, like when you think of PERMA and positive psychology, that like it kind of ties into, for me, like the labeling theory. Like if you label something negative, they're more than likely going to adapt that attitude and, kind of give themselves a self-fulfilling prophecy of that. And I truly believe that if you label something more positive, that they will adapt to that. So, it's kind of giving them this sense of hope, this sense of, I don't have to be, the things that I was labeled, and I can move forward. I know that even when me and Elise did the training day, I know she mentioned the warm seat, that like myself and Elise also sat in the warm seat with staff, and like it was really difficult for us to accept all the positive feedback that they had given us. And I think that that's just a more common theme of life, where it's easier to accept these negative kind of connotations or viewpoints that we have of ourselves. And it's harder to accept these positive things, but the more they're implemented and the more they're educated on them, that they become the norm rather than the negative, and it becomes easier to hear those things.
And to that, because I always have something to say, and Yvette, please jump in. I did sort of quickly after he moved into his forever home, I got to the root of his negative thought process, and that I guess escalated some behaviors. It was learned behavior from things, there are other people on here, things that were said to him over the course of years. So that started to be learned behavior with his thought process. And Yvette, was his sister away in the service at one point? Because then when she came, okay, because then when she came home, and he loves his sister, when she came home and started to see how his thought process was, she started to be a very integral part of trying to sort of reverse that. So with her help, and she still has been a force in his life, with her help, and then with us in there, we were trying to reverse like the negative thought processes, which weren't even his own natural. They were learned processes from other people in family. So
I think that's really important, because part of the work that Beth and Mona did in this case was, it wasn't just about Nathaniel and the new group home staff and trying to change their perception, but a lot of work went into the parents and the family. They have another child with autism who actually experienced a lot more of behavioral health symptoms throughout his life than Nathaniel did, and was already in a group home. And that really, it challenged the way that they interacted with their children, and it challenged the way that they saw the world. Beth noted earlier when she spoke about the letter that the mother had included in the crow. And that was one of the first things I was like, he had this, escalation. Okay, we understand that. We understand the trigger, but he's been stable for years prior. So like, why is nobody picking him up to say, let's at least screen him? So we got a copy of The Crow, and that was the first. Even then I was like, well, this is why. And the mother had no malintent, but she thought, well, they'll need to see why it's so important that he gets placed. So they need to know everything negative that could ever happen or potentially happen. We didn't take out any of the facts, but we reframed about his perseverance and his grit and his interest and his strengths, and were provided the potential, resources and residential programs with a different side of what he could be, and presented that to them in addition to the challenges that were within the packet. And that made a difference. I mean, it felt like almost instantly people came out to interview him. And that was the start of the mother understanding why a different perspective was necessary. And she really bought into it, which is, really important. It's not just about the new system and the paid supports, because a lot of that negative kind of thought process, like Mona mentioned, came from years of communicating in that way in the family home, and from other people. So Yvette's work with the mother, which was very intensive, and with the family system, bringing the sister in when she returned from the Peace Corps, was incredibly important to have this last, for him.
I find I've been a care manager for almost 2 years now, and I find that I'm always taken aback for a moment. And when I run the life plan meetings, and because when I go to write the life plans, I go to put in improve communication skills. One of the default suggestions is improve positive communication skills, but there's no default suggestion for just improve communication. So myself and many others just go, okay, fine, whatever, and just click and put it in. And then I go through the life plans in my meetings, and my individuals meetings, person-centered. And I find some of the parents are like, okay, fine, whatever. But some of the really attentive parents and advocates, they pause me for a second and say, what do you mean by positive communication? Why don't you just write communication? Like, what's the difference? And I find myself stepping back and going, that's a great question. Why did I put positive communication? Why do we always put positive communication? What is the difference? And I've always just sort of scrambled around for a definition, but like what we're discussing today, it really gives real depth to the understanding of positive communication, in contrast, not just as a subset of communication, but actually in contrast as a freestanding concept in and of itself. Positive psychology, positive, and until today, I would explain it as, positive communication is, instead of encouraging communication, we encourage positive communication. I would like to have, or I think it's a good idea to have. And that's how I always explained it until today. And now I have a whole depth of understanding, and I'm going to try not to overwhelm my future life plan meetings with a whole speech of a mini version of this whole session. Listen, guys, there's this class you guys have to take. Look it up. But it's very helpful.
Good.
To have, because I'm also in grad school learning, getting my MSW and my LMSW. I'm about halfway through. So like as a care manager now, and approaching and educating myself simultaneously and moving towards the direction of becoming a clinical therapist, God willing, I have these multi-pronged perspective on everything that I do, not just writing life plans. And this positive psychology hits me as a care manager, it hits me as a future clinician, it hits me as a social work student. It's really great stuff as a coworker, being a supervisee, as a therapist, just across the board. It has such a meaningful impact.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Abby. It's a really great perspective. And, we talk about this so much, so that for you to have that kind of experience during the CET is just amazing for you to share. So I really appreciate it. It is a really important piece. And when I first joined START in 2017, and this is infused in START, it made me look at myself even and my own relationships and my own well-being, and not just being okay or even just happy. So it's really impactful to the work that we do. And the way you even explained the life plan experience and how you were explaining positive communication versus how it will be explained in the future. That's what START intends to do, is build everybody's capacity in small, meaningful ways. And what you just described is an excellent visualization of that, of how it's going to change your future work in your care management work and your future clinical work. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's exactly what we were here to intend to do. So I appreciate that.
Avi, something so simple that often say to systems, and it's really simple, but I get a big reaction because the negative can be so automatic, especially since it's been over the course of a lifetime. But when I'm trying to sort of hint to my systems while the client is sitting there, I will say, I try not to speak things into the air. And I will actually get this reaction. Oh, but it's so simple because they're just so automatically doing it. So that's my standard phrase I use to try to get them to.
I find the moment I start explaining positive communication, I get instant buy-in from the parents or advocates. Instant buy-in. They immediately understand. They go from like, what is this to, oh, that makes an incredibly meaningful amount of sense. Thank you. Yeah. And I always double check and be like, I just want to clarify. Do we feel, so and so, and obviously he's there. A lot of my, like I said, I have care managers. So in the ID community, some of them are very active, involved, and some of them, we work with them. But yeah, so I say, do we think that so and so, and so jump in if you have something you want to share with us. Do we feel that communication is really the goal here, or do we feel positive communication is the goal here? Because if communication is the goal, positive communication might actually be frustrating for them because we're just trying to get them to speak. We're just trying to help them vocalize their thoughts, bring their inner world into a way to connect with their outer world. And positive communication might be too much for them. But on the other hand, if they can communicate, then neglecting positive communication as a focus is actually not doing them a service. It's like, yeah, you can already communicate, but let's see if we can bring that out more. It's not you missed the bus and that's okay. It's I have an opportunity to explore my community on the way to whatever. It's a whole shift in framework, and I get instant buy-in from the parents, instant buy-in from the advocates, and the provider's like, okay, fine, whatever, because a lot of them are all about the billing. You guys understand what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
But like, it's amazing to see the shift, the drastic and sudden shift in understanding and connection with the support circle. The moment I explain what is positive communication.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, everything we talked about today with positive psychology and PERMA, it's more than just how we communicate with each other. That's a part of it. And it's this very large aspect of how the person is living their life. And again, when I talked about, the engagement in PERMA, it's not just about having a day program, right? Or giving something to occupy their time. It's about having the right thing to occupy their time that puts them in flow, and that positive spin on things makes sense, right? So thank you again, Avi, for sharing that. Does anyone else have any comments or questions?
Well, one thing I just wanted to add again is it's based on science. So when I do a consult for a group home, and part of my job also with free is I'll discuss cases that are complicated, I'll try to explain to them, because often the thought is, well, the individual needs more antidepressant, the individual needs more antipsychotic. What I try to explain is some of the chemical changes from a positive psychology front will do that, but we'll do that without the side effects. So it's not one or the other. It's not that we shouldn't use meds, we should use meds. It's that when it's used in harmony, you may be synergistically supplementing the impact of the meds by coming in with a positive flow psychology view of it. So they really do work well together. And sometimes when you describe the science to it, you get the disbeliever to understand it a little more because it's a little more concrete.
Absolutely.
I wanted to add something. I want to thank you guys for allowing me to come to this. I'm working on a difficult case with Jen, and I actually got a lot of ideas as I was listening to this presentation to support this person that we're having a difficult time with. So again, I didn't realize, I've never heard of this. So I really learned a lot, and I really wanted to thank you guys for, as a care manager, just like the other care manager was talking about, sometimes we get yelled at a lot by a lot of negative families, but I also get a lot of families that do say positive things to me or are very thankful. And I think I need to write them down more because the negative responses come out
Mm-hmm.
more than the positive ones. And that's what makes my job so difficult because there is no services out there and you're doing your best.
Yeah.
And you know, I think sometimes I have to step back and say, oh, when a parent calls me and says, oh, thank you, you know, write it down and
Yeah.
to look back and say, wow, look at, I did all this for these people. It's okay. I didn't,
Mhm.
this family's not happy. I'm not going to make everybody happy because it's just not going to work. And I
Exactly.
really, you know, enjoyed this presentation. So thank you.
Thank you, Carol. I'm glad
Carol Ann, I actually have a quote board for that exact reason. I have
I
a
love
quote board.
that.
You can't see it because it's behind my screen, but I have a quote board, and every time I get a text from a parent or I get an email from a parent, I write down the day, the individual, and what they said. And I have it right here, and it's a visual reminder. I had a CET crisis meeting with New York Start last week for one of my individuals, and after the meeting, the parent texted me and said, quote, "Thank you very much for today." I had
Mhm.
another life plan. I had another self-direction intake meeting earlier this week. And after the meeting, the parents emailed me and said, you know, we have a younger daughter with ASD who's 10 years old, and we weren't going to enroll them with OPW because it's been such a headache with our older son that you're working with. But since you've gotten involved and you've really taken an advocacy role with so-and-so, we actually want to get our younger daughter enrolled in OPW, and can you please help us also move her in self-direction because we feel more comfortable with the system now. So yeah, I fully encourage you, Carol Ann, to do that. Our jobs as care managers, as social workers, as clinicians, whatever, it's so hard and it's very wearying, and we need to remind ourselves, visual, simple, straightforward, blunt reminders. We're awesome and we work hard and we deserve to be recognized. And with COVID, we sometimes have to recognize ourselves, and that's okay. So, quote board, I encourage it.
That's a
Thank you.
great idea. I try to start all of the clinical supervision within the START team with appreciations and acknowledgements. And, you know, just being able to say, Aveth, you did an amazing job at your CET today, or Jillian, thank you so much for working so hard for the Resource Center team, or whatever it is, like it means a lot. And hearing it from your peers and reminding you guys, you know, each other of, you know, we all have difficult jobs and we do sometimes have the cases where they're not very happy and they're not getting their needs met, even though we're working as hard as possible. Then we have these other systems that are truly thankful for us being in their, you know, their child or loved one's life. So that quote board is a great option. And, you know, again, sharing those successes with your teams and your coworkers is really helpful to remind us all why we do the job that we do.
I like could not agree more about like the idea of like a board and like, you know, really acknowledging those kinds of things, because at the Resource Center, in terms of Perma, like we've really been working hard to implement this like healthier diet, right? And this kind of like healthier kind of menu that's going around here. And it's been a struggle, to say the least. They're very food focused when they come here. And a lot of them are repeats who are very used to like kind of like the lax, have whatever you want. And I've really been working on actually developing like a board where they can mark off that they've had this many vegetables today, or, you know, they've reached their waters for the day, and just kind of like that kind of board with like Velcro and photos to kind of put in place each one that they've done so they can mark it off and feel good about it too. And I do believe that like any kind of board or acknowledgement in that sense is really, really rewarding without it being an actual physical reward other than taking care of themselves and their bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. What a lovely discussion. Thank you all so much for joining us and participating. Does anyone have any last thoughts before we end for the day? Okay. Well, thank you all for joining. Thank you all for for speaking up and contributing to our discussion following. I agree, Avi, Pinterest is amazing. I have a whole board of quotes that are positive and motivational. There's also a motivation app on the iPhone that literally once a day will send you a motivational quote. It's literally called like motivation. It's awesome. So I recommend that when you need a little boost. But again, obviously with all the work that we do, we focus on this with our individuals and the systems that we all support. But it's also important for ourselves, as we just discussed, and our coworkers and our family as well, to find our own sense of PERMA. So I hope that you take in the information that we shared and not only apply it to the individuals and the people that we all support, but also to yourselves to get through the hard days a little bit smoother. So thank you all again for joining us. This CET has been recorded, and I am going to upload it to our YouTube channel. For anyone that doesn't know, we have a New York Start Region 5 YouTube channel that has various trainings and different tools that we put together during COVID. So if you want to share the information that was received during this training with others, they'll be able to find it there in the coming days. So thank you all again very, very much, and we'll see you soon.